for a moment stays within its rhythm or its beginning. That's a really alliterative. Within its rhythm or its beginning. But that's not because it's very mellifluous. It's short vowel sounds, so it musically it moves. It's smooth within its rhythm or its beginning to end. Period. But then we're getting that now. So we've gotten that smooth there, and so now we're getting to the summary here. The last two lines: within its beginning to end. Period. And it ends. Period. And then there is life. Period. And the mellifluous light of evening. So that's almost like. I like that. So now we're going to type this up, and I'll probably might change one thing here. But before we do, just sound-wise, I haven't talked about the sound here. I'm going to try to read it here and pause slightly at the commas just to give a sense of the rhythm and just the sound-wise here. So Gein Becoming, 1965. The uncaused moment, that is this comma, is the bough that for but a moment sways, as only its motion relates the day beyond the bars that the sonnet infers, as the mellifluous light of morning inters his eyes within this space of time, without that joy, undeterred by this rhyme, where he smiles in a way just seeming, to hint at a skull which only relates to his past this poem finds so distractive, unlike that bough which for a moment stays within its rhythm or its beginning to end, and it ends, and then there is life, and the mellifluous light of evening. So, I like that. As far as the end rhymes, we have comma, infers, sways, day. They're off. They're not exact, and I like that. Morning seeming is close. Time rhyme is the only one that's really a direct rhyme here. Then we've got relates, stays, and beginning, evening, and then we've got the middle lines of the two tercet, distractive and life. So it's close enough that you can get away with it and having one that doesn't really rhyme, but it has the I there and the E. That's fine. And what else would we have here? Just to point out, like I said, we have the swaying and the morning, and then we have the calm, the staying, and the evening, and both with mellifluous light. So we have coming together the and of the last three sentences gives, and in a sense, the use of the and almost is a grammatical recapitulation of the I's in the 12th line, within its rhythm or its beginning, and so we have a sense that the poem here is using devices, and because we've acknowledged that throughout that there's a comma sonnet poem, that it is an artifice. It gives it's almost like in a lot of Vermeer's paintings here. For example, one of Vermeer's paintings here, quite a few of them, he's painting where he pulls back the curtain. This is the art of painting, and here's a curtain, and it's almost like we're acknowledging that that's the art. And so by using words like sonnet and poem, etc., and using these tricks here, we're almost like painting a portrait of Gein, but we're acknowledging that it is art, and so therefore it might not really be Gein, and it isn't really Gein since he's dead. And so now we're going to type it up, and we'll just my brother's typewriter, much better than that Smith Corona crap. I went through a couple of Smith Coronas in a couple of years. This brother has lasted about a year and a half. I didn't like the typeface when I first got it, but I got used to it. So this is actually this will be the 123rd sonnet that I've written for my Omnisonnets 3 collection. And I'll probably have another, this is probably blocking you. I don't know if you want to, is the light blocking you?
No.
Okay. Let's see. So, whoops.
We'll probably go to handheld though.
Okay, well. Okay, so I'm going to get my 12 page here. Margin release. Right margin. Oops. I gotta put that in again. But so now it's just a matter of typing this up, and very little is going to change probably in the typed version, because I did most of the cleanup before I typed it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes inspiration strikes and there's something nagging. But I like the painterly aspects here. So let's see, 3, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 spaces. So we go to 48, and so we go to 40 here. So we have my one-finger typing. Ed Gein Becoming, 1965. 1965. I know I'm so politically incorrect. I'm glorifying a murderer. No, I'm not. I'm just trying to show, because the poem doesn't glorify his murderousness in any way. So let's see here. The uncaused moment is the uncaused moment, that is this comma. And I just like to check myself, because sometimes I do poems that have 15 lines and no one catches it, not even me.
I'm just gonna say I don't know if I have enough tape for your one finger typing.
Well,
yeah, it's a joke.
Is the bough that for but a moment sways. Is, for sways. And once I get this typed up, you can film it here, because then I can explain it a lot more easily than here. As only its motion relates the day. As only its motion relates the day, comma. And the fact that, let's see, where does the first period? The first period really doesn't appear until the 13th line, or it's beginning to end, which is a nice trick here, because that phrase, or it's beginning to end, and then 3 short lines, and it is ba-ba-ba-ba. You have this long, and in a sense that you have this long, complex sentence that mostly focuses on his becoming static or peaceful, but then you've got a tension here, because, and it ends, and then there is life, and the mellifluous life, sound-wise, and what it says is depicting his calm, but coming after that long, complex sentence, it's not. It's very staccato, and so that's interesting. Relates the day. Let's see. Beyond the bars that the sonnet. Beyond the bars that the sonnet infers. And I am going to break it. Beyond the bars that the sonnet infers, because I was thinking, should I do just 14 straight lines or go with quatrain terces? I'm going to go the Baudelairean route here, because beyond the bars that the sonnet infers, it relates to this, it gives the comma in the sonnet, both the first and the fourth lines relate to the poeticness of the artifice, and that's a good way to end a quatrain. Whoops, thank you for the correction button. As the mellifluous, as the mellifluous light of morning. Beyond this sonnet infers. Okay, I just saw it. Here's, we put a comma there that wasn't there, so this is clean up. I did that because infers, watch with this line, I'll tell you why I put that comma there. Inters his eyes within this space. Inters his eyes within this space of time. Space. Now, originally here, if you can, I'll come back here. If you can see, I had beyond the bars that the sonnet infers as the mellifluous light of morning. I didn't have that comma after morning. And so reading-wise, we were going, beyond the bars that the sonnet infers, comma, as the mellifluous light of morning inters his eyes. We have a straight narrative here. Putting that comma in there, we don't lose that because, but we can also drop, that also allows the reader here to perhaps drop this line and just go, beyond the bars that the sonnet infers, inters his eyes within the space of time, infers, inters, that reading that if you drop that line, beyond the bars that the sonnet infers, then the sonnet is also inters his eyes. The sonnet also is not only inferring but interring something, if you want to read it that way. If the person, so you're giving someone more options there, and you're not losing anything. And I will always go with the multiple meanings. If I can. Let's see. Okay. Space of time. Without that joy, undeterred by this rhyme. Without that joy, undeterred by. Without that joy, undeterred by this rhyme. Where he smiles, I'm thinking here, where he smiles, comma, or should I have the comma here, where he smiles in a way to hint at a skull, where he smiles to hint at a skull, where he smiles in a way, comma, just seeming, where he smiles to hint at a skull, where he smiles in a way to hint at a skull. Where he smiles in a way which only relates, where he smiles in a way which only relates to his past. I like the comma there better than here. Where he smiles in a way to hint at his skull. Yeah, that's a better comma. Again, okay, so where he smiles, placement of commas. Commas are very useful things, and this is a classic Schneider comma type poem where he smiles. Now wait a minute, where he smiles, should I? No, way just seeming. Now, see, if I put a comma, if I kept both commas there, that's a little too much there. Where he smiles, let me think here, no, maybe not. Where he smiles, comma, in a way just seeming, comma, to hint at a skull, which only, where he smiles in a way to hint at a skull, where he smiles in a way which only relates, where he smiles just seeming to hint at a skull, where he smiles just seeming which only relates. No. Where he smiles in, whoops. Where he smiles in a way just seeming. Okay, so 8 down, 6 to go. To hint at a skull which only relates. Hint at a skull. Which only relates. Hint at a skull. To his past, to his past, this poem finds so distractive. His past, this poem finds so distractive. Unlike that bough, which for a moment stays. Now here in the 11th line, I didn't want to put a comma, for example, after where he smiles, in the 8th line, where he smiles, comma, in a way just seeming, because it wouldn't relate to the next line. It would be confusing. But here I added a comma, for example, unlike that bow which, comma, for a moment, comma, stays, comma, because it'll connect well to the next line within its rhythm. But also, too, going back to the line that it relates to earlier, is the bow that for, comma, but, comma, a moment sways. I've got basically the same line, but rhythmically, I've got here that bow which, comma, for a moment stays. So I have the phrase for a moment separated, a space in time, for a moment, which relates back to that space of time, or it would have if I hadn't done the in, but it's just a little device that what looks kind of the same. It's comma for a moment, comma, stays, contrast against but, comma, a moment sways. So just technically, visually, sound-wise, if you're reading it directly and you're pausing slightly for the commas, it's just a little bit different, a little bit off, which suggests change too. Okay, he stays within its rhythm or its beginning. Within its rhythm or its beginning to end. Within its rhythm to end. The bow that which, no, beginning to end, period to end, and it ends, and then there is life. It ends. And then to end, and it ends, and then there is life. And last line, and the mellifluous light of evening. Okay, now I'm just going to check to see typos, and then I'll explain just a little bit, and then I don't know, Dylan, if you have any questions, or something that maybe someone watching this might want to know, I can answer. So let's see. Gein becoming, 1965. The uncaused moment, that is this comma, is the bow that for but a moment sways, as only its motion relates the day, beyond the bars that the sonnet infers, as the mellifluous light of morning inters his eyes within the space of time, without that joy, undeterred by this rhyme, where he smiles in a way just seeming to hint at a skull which only relates to his past. This poem finds so distractive, unlike that bow which for a moment stays within its rhythm or its beginning to end, and it ends, and then there is life, and the mellifluous light of evening. So, I mean, line-wise here, we've got a lot of alliteration and assonance. The first line, uncaused moment, that is this comma, the C's and the M's. Bow that for but a moment stays, the B, the B's and the T's. Bow, but, then we have that, but, moment. Then we have the last word sways, then relates the day, motion, beyond the bars that the sonnet infers. So we have beyond the bars, the sonnet infers. So we have an internal rhyme there in that line, which is good. As the mellifluous light of morning, the L's, mellifluous, and M's, and the I's, the mellifluous light of morning, inters his eyes within the space of time. Without that joy, undeterred by this rhyme. Again, a lot of T's in that line. And the Y's too, without a joy rhyme, where he smiles in a way, just seeming, smiles, the S and M sound there, smile, seeming is good, to hint at a skull, which again, as far as I can tell, is really the only thing that suggests even violence here, which is really good. I went away from what would be expected. To hint at a skull, which only relates, so hint, relate, to his past, this poem, BP, finds so distractive. I got a nice abruptive word in there, distractive, but yet you can toss that phrase out because it's got the two commas around it. Unlike that bow which for a moment stays, which I explained that line before, why it contrasts well against the line that it comments on, within its rhythm or its beginning, the I is going crazy there, but it's setting a nice sort of systolic pace to end, and it ends, and then there is life, and the mellifluous light of evening. So, I mean, that's it. Uh, Questions? We've done it.
Well, what does it mean? You want me to go with the audience?
But seriously, is that, I mean, you know, I mean, so we've seen here, and what we started about an hour and 15 minutes, I'd say, about 70 minutes here. So it gives us a good almost 2.5 hours to do other stuff. But so there it is. I think I've explained why I chose the title. I think we had a good idea of why I chose certain words. And this is, I have to say, to pat myself on the back, I'm going to have to let this sit for a few hours. I don't know if this is a great sonnet, but I mean, it's, even if it's not a great sonnet and that it doesn't illuminate anything, technically it's damn good. And that's one of the things that people have to realize is, if you wait for the moments of inspiration, you know, you're going to be waiting a long time. And so I just put here done. But you have to develop skill. You know, there are people that I know who have a lot of talent, awesome talent. They don't work at it. You have to work at it. And hopefully, in seeing some of the mindly processes here, you know, I went, you know, I had directions I was going, and then I scrapped them because it wasn't working. I had the Vermeer thing, but there's some abstraction here too. There are nice images, the mellifluous light of evening, and it's very classical. It's almost, you know, a mellifluous light of evening sounds like it could be from Shakespeare or a romantic poet, but yet it's about Gein. So those are things that give it some gravitas. I don't know what more I could say. Do you have any?
What percentage of your poetry would you say is by divine inspiration?
Inspiration. If I see a beautiful woman, I can rip off on something. But usually most of these things here, if you see, I've got all kinds of ideas. It's usually, you know, sometimes it's not just one singular divine or inspired idea. It's the concatenation of a number of things. For example, I did this poem. This was a Sports Illustrated from last year on the long count, Dempsey and Tunney. And I did a poem, at least a first draft, that I'm going to bring to the Uptown Poetry Group this Friday, that I'm going to need to get some ideas. I had to get it out sooner or later, and I got this Thomas Jefferson, there's some books there, this Thomas Jefferson poem. There are inspirations, and it's finding the forms. I want to do like different sonnets or rondeaus, ballades within this long Jefferson poem. It's about sort of let it sort of come together, and then boom, one day, one Saturday, you know, I have 5 or 6 hours, I'll get out that draft, I'll bring it to the poetry group, I'll get a few comments, I may not change anything, I may structurally rearrange it, but it's all about work. I mean, art is work. I mean, you know, it's an avocation in the sense that you can't make money for it, but it has to be your vocation. And so here's yet another chapter in this one. And so that notebook is done here. That's done. And you know, off the top of my head, I generally give things a score between 1 and 100. I would say this is probably in the low 90s. I'll have to read it. Technically, I think technically the skill overwhelms what's saying it at this point. But if I come back and look at it, because I've got my marble notebook that I'll transcribe it into at the end of the day here. You know, having 8 hours or so between time might give me time to come at it fresh again. But I don't think there's anything that really can change unless I look and find I mistyped something here. But I mean, it's pretty solid. I mean, it's better than I thought I was going to do, quite frankly. And you know, before you came, for example, I was looking at the Vermeer book, and the Vermeer, you know, looking at a great artist gives you, you know, and like I said, when I originally put that down, the Vermeer idea didn't come until I wrote the first couple of lines, and so That's you have to be open to all influences. You can't segregate things out. You're only killing yourself that way artistically. You know, this is in a pro-Gein poem, and you know, again, throughout the title, what's it about? You know, Ed Gein becoming. I mean, without the title, you know, the bars, one of the bars, I don't know. So that's it. Maybe someday we'll do another one. But that was probably about 75 minutes it took from conception. That for a, and this is fairly complex. This is a fairly complex sonnet. If I were doing, you know, there are certain young ladies out there that know who they are. If I was writing a love sonnet on one of them and I was moved by their beauty, I could probably bang one out in 20-25 minutes. But
Nice pun.
what?
Bang.
So that's it.
Well, when you say you can bang one out, were you talking about the women or the poem?
Well, hopefully both. I'm into duplicity, yeah. So there it is, and I guess that's it then, unless there's any other